I mean, you can go back to the basics of learning. If there's no mistakes, there's no learning, right? No one ever learned to walk the first time. Right? In fact, it's wonderful to watch really young children, infants, going through that process of learning, because they're making mistakes all the time. They're starting to walk, they start to stand up, they hold on, they fall down. Eventually they learn to fall down so they don't hurt themselves. But the very process of learning is inevitably a process of making mistakes. And you realize that, you know, you could get hurt. It may not turn out the way you want. So that's not a problem, because you don't ride a bicycle perfectly the first time. Nothing. It's obvious. The problem becomes the cultures we create. And usually this problem starts in school. So if you talk to a 4 or 5-year-old child, they have no problem making mistakes. They know, well, of course you make mistakes. But that same child, by the age of 8 or 9 or 10, you say, well, what do you think of mistakes? Well, mistakes are bad. Because the teacher we tell it, no, that's wrong. That's the wrong answer. And notice the gesture. That's the wrong answer. So now you're kind of making it wrong to be wrong. Mistakes are a mistake. That's a shift. That's a fundamental shift in attitude, and for most people it starts in school. That's one of the reasons why transforming the culture of schools is so important. And so I think that in some ways that's a very simple problem. It's not an easy problem, but how do we create cultures where making mistakes is a good thing? Now, not surprisingly, in the last 20 years or so, many industries that have to learn rapidly, they realize that we have to transform the attitude about mistakes. So in the software industry, for example, very common, the phrase, fail fast and fail early. Because it's much better to make a lot of mistakes at the beginning and do it quickly and learn quickly. So they have to create a culture of rapid mistake making and learning from mistakes. And it has to be okay to make mistakes. And they create a whole discipline cycles, the agile field, which is very big in the software industry, is all about a disciplined approach to making mistakes quickly, because the sooner you make it, the faster you learn. So that's a pretty fundamental shift in the culture, and that's the main thing. It's a discipline to transforming culture. So if you have to learn, you have to make mistakes, and I think the only thing that's really a shift there is the imperative, do you have to learn? And if you think about it, what you're really saying in those particular industry settings is that there's no way we'll figure this out. That's the radical statement. Because the traditional hierarchical concept was somebody up there, like the boss, they figure it out. And everybody else just does things. So you're now starting to say, no, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO, or in those industries often the most important person is the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. That person doesn't figure it out either. Nobody figures it out. I have a good friend who's been very successful in the software industry. He's had 3 different startups that he was involved in creating the organization and eventually selling the organization. He made a lot of money. And he said it very elegantly, I thought, a few years ago, when he said, you know, the whole software industry crossed a threshold. He felt probably about 10 years ago now, because he told me this several years ago. He said 4 or 5 years ago, where the complexity of the software environments is such that nobody understands. Nobody understands how they work. They're not understandable. He said, when you cross that threshold, your whole attitude changes. It's not about control. It's not about figuring it out. It's about how rapidly you can learn. You make small steps and you learn quickly, rather than trying big, grand strategies and thinking that you've got it all figured out, and then you find out later it's a complete disaster. He said it used to be a new product, their product development cycle, he said used to be like 6 to 9 months. He said now it's 1 to 2 weeks, because it's too complex. You have to take small steps and learn really fast. That's a very fundamental shift. that we don't have a grand strategy for multiple years. We work on small incremental steps. That's true in the software industry today, but of course it's not true in our society. We still think the president should have a strategy to figure out, for the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever. It's crazy. But it's not surprising that these deep cultural changes will not occur uniformly. They'll occur in pockets. Remember what I said about the future? The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. So those industries that are working on the small incremental steps in a very disciplined way, they're really much more like life. There's no grand strategy for raising your kids. Every step is a new step. So I think it gets, ironically, more and more like life, and less like this machine that we figure it all out and then just let the machine run. So that's another way to characterize the real changes that are gradually occurring in our society. We're starting to get more close to really a living system, a natural system that isn't figure-outable.